My daughter and grandson are dead. Forget it. I will never forgive you. My mother was a very cold person. When I was young, I didn't like my mother. My husband was terribly upset when he heard my mother's words on the phone. Maybe you're not lying. I don't mind, because if you are, you'll be in trouble, right? In a sinister voice, the devil whispered to her son. I could easily imagine her grinning just from hearing her voice. Good. Shall we go then? I think you're the one who's really in trouble. My mother hung up the phone after saying that. My name is Lily, and I am a 33-year-old office worker. I met my husband Kago through my grandmother, who attends a tea ceremony class. I don't like this grandmother. He is the grandson of someone I met at the tea ceremony class, but he's also a kind and good person. Lily, please meet me just once so you can meet this man. I was taken quite forcibly to meet him. I never thought that I would go on an arranged marriage meeting, but at that time I was close to 30 years old, and I knew that one day I would get married. In the end, I gave in to my grandmother's push, but when I actually met this man, I was happy to learn that both he and his parents had good personalities. After dating for about a year, I married Keiko, whom I'm still married to. My husband's family runs a company, and as his parents' only son, my husband will be their next president. My family is extremely ordinary, so when my friends and colleagues found out about my marriage, they envied me, calling me spoiled. See, I was right, that you two would get along. My grandmother was proud of our union. Kego's family included his father, my father-in-law, his mother, my mother-in-law, along with his grandmother, my grandmother-in-law. Kego's grandmother did not live with them. My husband's brother got ill and passed away several years ago, and now the company is run by my husband's father. My husband lived at home until he married me. Perhaps because of that, he didn't do any of the household chores properly. For example, the clothes he took off, he'd just leave there, and even after he finished eating, he didn't put away the dish he used. If I warned him, he would do it, but only reluctantly. It's been several months since I got married, and no matter how many times I say it, it doesn't seem to get better. Hey, why don't you keep your socks on? Oh, you've been making a lot of noise caring for our house. Mother did it silently, he said jokingly. Huh? What did you just say, mother? Did you say mother? I was flabbergasted by this. I'm not your mother. I packed my things and went home. My family looked surprised at my sudden return, but I lied and said that I was lonely because my husband was on his business trip. When my grandmother asked me about my married life, I said, well, it's okay. I had no choice but to answer. Do not cause any trouble, my grandmother and father reminded me. Seeing my wry smile on my face, only my mother, Lily, are you really doing well over there? I heard her. It's normal, and it's not something your mother should worry about. Yes, it would be nice if that were the case. It's been this way with my mom since I was little. Conversation does not last, and just talking makes me very nervous. My mother has always been a scary person to me. My father was always busy with work and wasn't home much, and my grandfather passed away when I was in elementary school. From my point of view, as a child, my parents' house revolved around my grandmother. When I was young and asked my mother about something, the words that came back to me were, "Ask Grandma." As a child, I came to think that my mother was not interested in me, and after that I stopped consulting my parents about things. However, my grandmother was somewhat intrusive. If Lily does what Grandma says, she will definitely be happy, she said, as if it were a habit. As soon as I graduated from university, I ran away from home. To be honest, I didn't really understand what a family was like. However, I knew that everyone in my husband's family seemed to be on good terms and always ate together. No matter how hungry I am, I have to wait until everyone is ready to begin eating, I've heard my husband say. It didn't seem to change even after he got married and left his parents' home. About 3 days later after, I returned home. Lily? My demon-looking grandmother called me while I was resting in my room. Surprisingly, my husband Kago and mother-in-law were there too. I came to pick you up. It's my fault. Let's go home together. Seated there was a husband who seemed self-reflective. Lily, I heard about it from Kago. It seems I spoiled him too much. Kago seems to be self-reflecting. Could you please come back? I was completely deceived by their apologetic appearance. I heard the reason for the quarrel, but Lily, you are also to blame. As my grandmother said that with a sigh, she glanced sideways at my mother, when my mother whispered that she was sorry. Lily, Kago and your mother-in-law came back to pick me up like this, so try your best, she said. I thought that only my mother would be protected, but it seems that it is useless to expect. What about the past? It's Rawa now, a new imperial era in Japan elevating order and harmony. We should be getting along. Should we break up like this? But I understand, I replied with one word and left my home. I was silent in the car on the way home when my mother-in-law said to me, Lily, if the housework is so hard, then why don't we eat together? I will cook for you and Kago. Of course, there was no reason to be happy about my mother-in-law's proposal. No, not really. I want Kago to help me with the house more. If I do that more, then, as if interrupting my words, why? Why does Kago do housework? Housework is the wife's job, isn't it? My mother-in-law looked at me with a questioning face. But I'm working too. You know, Lily, we're not a normal family. Kago will take over the company one day, and it's your job. You want me to quit right now, you know? It's not a big deal. It's not my job. I've been working at my current company since I graduated from university. I like challenging work, but I also like kind colleagues. Even when I'm silent, my mother-in-law doesn't stop talking. I'm pregnant, I told my mother-in-law, even though I was told to keep it a secret. In fact, the week before this incident, the pregnancy test came out positive. My husband was happy with this. I knew that when I was pregnant, I wouldn't be able to move like I used to. Since my husband was going to be a father, I wanted him to at least be a little bit more cooperative with housework. That's all there is to it. I hadn't been examined at a maternity hospital yet, and I was irritated. However, things took an unexpected turn. My mother-in-law was complaining to me until recently. Huh? Pregnant, Lily? Are you pregnant? She became gentle, as if the palm had been turned back. Huh? Suddenly what? Does this person have a split personality or something? After that, when I parted from my mother-in-law and returned to my home, the room was surprisingly clean. Huh? Did you clean it up? I wish you had kept the pregnancy a secret, I said to my husband. My mother has been bothering me for a long time. I didn't tell you, but she was annoyed that I was going to have a baby soon. I'm sorry. He sincerely thanked me. Looking at my husband like that, I thought that I would try a little harder. But it's not because my mother said it. But eating at my parents' house isn't a bad thing, is it? At least on weekends, let's be spoiled. I couldn't find any reason to refuse when he said that in a gentle tone, probably because he cared about me and my body. I should have refused at this point, but the hellish pregnancy life starts here. When I went to the maternity hospital the next week, yes, you are pregnant. I was happy with what the doctor said. I vowed to give a lot of love to my unborn child. Eating at my mother-in-law's house wasn't as bad as I had imagined. My father-in-law and grandmother-in-law were also very happy about my pregnancy, more than anything. Come on, Lily, eat. You're pregnant with our precious heir. My mother-in-law felt a little old, but it was much better than her feeling sarcastic. I wondered what would happen, but thought to myself, I can do this. The thought soon fell apart. It happened at a dinner with my in-laws the following week. On this day, I was at my limit. I made a request to my mother-in-law despite feeling ashamed. I'm sorry, mother-in-law. My mother-in-law's face, which until then had been smiling, suddenly turned grim. Why? Well, I started getting morning sickness a few days ago. I feel like I'm not eating well, and I feel sick if I don't put something in my mouth. My mother-in-law has, of course, experienced childbirth herself. I thought she would understand, but I got an unexpected reply from my mother-in-law. Huh? Morning sickness? Didn't you hear from Kago? We have a rule that we eat only after all of us are together. Until then, please be patient. A moment later, in a voice too soft for me to hear, "Totally nasty," she said jokingly. This made me sad, and tears welled up in my eyes. After all, my father-in-law came home late that day, and it was after 8 p.m. when I was able to eat dinner. Of course, I couldn't wait until then, so while my mother-in-law was away, I ate little by little from my plate to hide. I felt sad seeing myself like this. By the time I finally got home that night, it was past 10 p.m., as if to add to my tiredness. "Lily, at my parents' house today, no matter how hungry I was embarrassed to be so greedy," he said. Huh? Didn't I tell you? I think I'm starting to get more morning sickness. I feel sick if I don't eat something. I will explain. But in the end, well, I'm a man, so I don't understand even if you say that. Be careful next time, he said. I was overwhelmed with anger at this, and I was dumbfounded and unable to say anything. After that, I stopped going to my in-laws' house. I lied that I was not feeling well. In fact, morning sickness was painful and heavy, and I wished every day that it would end soon. At the same time, I felt love for my child, who was growing up safely. My father-in-law and grandmother-in-law kindly told me not to push myself too hard. But those two were different. "Hello, Lily. Are you planning on not coming over this weekend too? Kago is the only one who always comes over here. Don't you think that's rude?" The constant contact from my mother-in-law gave me a headache. If I don't pick up, the phone kept ringing until I picked it up. "Excuse me, mother-in-law, apparently I have severe morning sickness." "Huh? Again? I didn't have morning sickness. Does that mean you're feeling good?" she said jokingly. Yes, even though I looked sick on the street, they didn't sympathize with me. "Are you serious? That's a funny thing to say. Don't you understand that just because your mother-in-law doesn't have a thrush doesn't mean that everyone else does? I'm sorry that the signal seems to be bad." After that phone call, I packed up my things and went back to my parents' house. By that time, I was about to enter the second half of my pregnancy. And when I told my husband that I wanted to go home early, "Isn't that sweet?" I ignored it. Even while I was on my way home, my mother-in-law and husband frequently contacted me. When I realized I wasn't answering the phone very often, he started sending me messages. "I let you go home early, so please come back here as soon as the baby is born. That child is our precious heir." My Kago told me that. "My room is not tidy. I'm too busy to clean it. So when you come back, please start by cleaning it. Your body will feel better after giving birth, right?" he said jokingly on the phone. I thought it was bad for my stomach when I got irritated, so I ignored everything. From my grandmother, "Seriously, Lily, even after the baby is born, I won't help you with anything." From my appearance, my grandmother was very displeased, probably because she realized that I was not getting along with my in-laws. "Lily, come here for a second. If there's one good thing, it would be that I had more opportunities to talk to my mother." I talked about what my mother-in-law and husband told me and what I had been told. Actually, things haven't been going well with Kago and his mother-in-law for a long time. Even though I am pregnant, Kago still will not do the housework. The real reason why I came back here early is because Kago has been in a hurry lately. I've become more and more irritated. I'm scared. A little while ago, Kago became more and more irritated. In his worst moments, he would yell at me for being pregnant and shove me on the shoulder. When I consulted my mother-in-law, she only told me to be patient. At that time, I had a bruise, and I have a medical certificate. Now that I am struck, I am thinking of getting a divorce after the baby is born. After my mother was silent for a while with a stern face, "Yes, I understand," I replied with just one word. After some time, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. When labor pains began, I contacted my husband, but maybe he didn't like my attitude of ignoring his earlier contact. I can't go because I'm busy with work. Just tell me when you're discharged from the hospital. Even though my child was about to be born, I felt dizzy given my crazy husband's attitude. I became angry given his attitude, so when I told him the day I was discharged from the hospital, I didn't contact him after that, and my husband didn't contact me either. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, my mobile phone rang when I was slowly returning to my parents' house. The other party was Kago. When I hesitated to answer the phone because I didn't want to talk, my mother, who was next to me, silently reached out to my mobile phone and put my husband on speakerphone. "Hey, you're discharged from the hospital today, aren't you? Why haven't you come home? Mom and I have been waiting for you since this morning. Come home early and show your grandchild to my mom." My husband screamed, echoed through my room. I was silent. "My daughter and grandson are dead. Forget it, and I will never forgive you." What my mother said was outrageous. Huh? That voice? Is that your... She died? Huh? My husband seemed terribly upset. Then I heard someone nearby to Kago. "Lily's mother, this is Kago's mother. Could it be that you're lying? This is where you get in trouble, right?" My body trembled just by hearing that nasal voice. My body was filled with disgust for my mother-in-law and husband. My mother stopped me when I tried to retort. "Good. Shall we get out? I think you're the one who's really in trouble, though. Let's go to the police to raise your hand with enough force to get a bruise." Saying so, my mother hung up the phone. The mother? When I was confused, my mother hugged me tightly as I held my son, saying that I was fine. It was my first time being hugged by my mother, and I was happy that she was on my side. When I was watching my son sleeping peacefully with my mother for a while, my grandmother, who was out, came back with noisy footsteps. "What the hell? You're still alive? I just got a call from Kago's mother. You guys hurt me in doing this too. I'm going to apologize now." My grandmother, who didn't even care about her grandchild, half forced us to take her to the in-laws' house. When I arrived at my mother-in-law's house, my mother-in-law and husband glared at me and my mother. "Oh, that child is our cute heir. Come on." As my mother-in-law approached me, "Don't touch me." My voice came out involuntary. Did those words touch the scales? "Hey, you should apologize. I only touched your shoulder, and the police are exaggerating." My husband yelled at me. I glared at my husband. "I can't divorce you anymore. You won't come to see my newborn child. Even though you're going to be a father, nothing will change for you. I can't imagine a happy future with you anymore." Raising his voice, my husband got scared because he was surprised by the word divorce from me. Yes, if you don't mind, but leave your grandchild behind and go out alone. Lily, aren't you suffering from postpartum depression? Besides, there's a crazy mother nearby who would even joke that she died. If so, my grandchild would not grow up properly." My mother-in-law told me that with a snort. "Your grandmother should take my side and apologize to me and my mother as soon as possible," Kago kept saying. Then my mother, who was silent, "Which one is crazy? My precious daughter and grandchild are not your toys." Saying that, my mother glared at my grandmother. It was at that time. "What happened earlier? There's a lot of noise. I can hear people yelling all the way from the building. Oh, did Lily and the others come?" The grandmother-in-law smiled at her son. "So, what is the situation here? Can you explain?" Kago's grandmother glared at her daughter with cold eyes. "No, mother-in-law's wrong." Our words seemed to resonate. Kago's grandmother, my grandmother-in-law, seemed to have heard the general story. Are you doing such a shameful thing as picking on your wife in this era of Rawa? At the words of my grandmother-in-law, the faces of my husband and mother-in-law turned pale at once. To think you are completely obsessed with the management of the company, and you are not able to grasp the actions of your wife. And Keiko, your son still has a long way to go. My grandmother-in-law smiled at that. Lily, I'll make sure you take responsibility. I'm sorry I didn't notice you. You're going to break up with Keigo, but I'd be happy if you could come see me again. Of course, thank you for your help. Oh, thank you. Then the grandmother-in-law looked at the awkward grandmother. You insisted, so I arranged a matchmaking between our grandchildren. Lily and her mother were very nice people, but what about you? As if to see something unpleasant, my grandmother was red to her ears. Looking at my husband and mother-in-law, who were in a dazed state, I bowed deeply to my grandmother-in-law and left the mother-in-law's house. Looking at me and my mother when we got home and packed our things, "Hey, where are you going? I won't let you do what you want," in the words of my grandmother. Yes? Your mother-in-law said that she won't allow you to divorce her son until you, Lily, have had a child. I've already put up with it. I later heard from my mother that my father had another woman somewhere else, and my grandmother told my mother that she was to blame. When he asked for a divorce, he told her that he would not allow my mother to take me while I was still young. I also found out that my grandmother did not take care of my grandfather at all, which was so sad. Mom, you were an idiot. I should have run away with Lily. If I had done that, Lily wouldn't have to suffer and would have been happy. My mother's words made me burst into tears. After that, my mother and I both got divorced. My father didn't want to pay alimony and asked for a divorce, but there was multiple pieces of evidence that indicated a long-standing affair, and when my mother said she would consult a lawyer, he reluctantly accepted the divorce. I was shocked to learn that my father was such a piece of crap. I have no intention of seeing him again. My mother also requested compensation for mental distress from my grandmother. When I asked for a lawyer, I heard that Keigo was scared and simply paid. It seems that rumors have already spread about this matter, and it seems that my grandmother has quit the tea ceremony class and is now mostly staying at home. In addition, my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law were kicked out of the former family. It seems that I had misunderstood, and it was only after my divorce that I learned that the former president of the company that Keigo's father works for was actually Keigo's grandmother. She's the chairman now. It seems that Keigo and the others were embezzling the company's money, and that the report came to the chairman, Keigo's grandmother. Choose here and now. Choose a company, this stupid wife, or stupid grandson. Hearing his mother's words, Lily's ex-husband chose the company without hesitation. The two cried and clung to each other, but of course there was no way they would be forgiven. The two are accused of a crime, but I heard that they are missing because they seem to have run away quickly. After the divorce was finalized, things were really good. Since then, my mom and I have rented a room and started living together with my son. I named my son Ayumyu. My mother began doing much better on her own. She was happier. Colleagues told me that my smile increased even at my part-time job. Ayumyu, it's a hat that grandmother knitted. When I started living with my mother, I learned a lot about her. That she's good at crafts, what she likes, what she doesn't like, what colors she likes. I didn't even know about my mother. Mom, thank you for everything. At my words, my mother suddenly smiled, a little embarrassed. From now on, I strongly vowed to walk the future with my precious family.
Ah, the wrestling sister! Scott's innocent voice echoed through the room. This was Walter's wedding venue. Mary is petite and clearly doesn't wrestle. Did you play wrestling with her? I asked, and Scott shook his head. Because she was on top of Grandpa the other day! The venue erupted into whispers at his words. Walter, myself, and a word from the boss made Cody and Mary realize the gravity of the situation. My name is Ruby. I'm 53. Grew up in a regular house in the countryside. Fell in love with my husband Cody when I was 20. We had a smooth relationship and discovered I was pregnant a few years later. Cody was only 20 at the time. However, he proposed, and here we are. Shotgun marriages were still frowned upon, and we were young, with little income. Life wasn't easy then. I earned more and essentially supported Cody, which became neighborhood gossip. But we persevered despite the cold stares. Cody worked hard and climbed the ladder. We have 2 sons, Walter and Taylor. Taylor, like us, had a shotgun marriage 5 years ago. Though society isn't as harsh now, we understand the challenges. I work part-time and help out by watching Scott when I can. Amelia, a student then, has been Taylor's girlfriend for a while and often visited our home. She's a good girl, and I have no worries about Taylor's future. Meanwhile, Walter never seemed interested in romance. No rumors ever. Earlier this year, Cody, concerned, wanted to introduce Walter to a colleague's daughter. Walter was reluctant, but I was worried about him staying alone, so we agreed to meet her. One weekend, Cody left early to pick her up. I was preparing lunch, waiting. It was special for her to come to our house on the first meeting. A kind gesture. The doorbell rang just past noon. Walter, who had come down to the first floor, sighed slightly. "Walter, don't sigh," I chided. Okay, he responded. "It's someone from Cody's workplace, right? Even if it doesn't work out, don't be rude." Walter made a face at my reminder. I want him to marry, but I know it shouldn't be forced. I just want Walter to find happiness. "Nice to meet you. I'm Mary." The woman who entered with Cody was small and cute. "Nice to meet you. I'm Ruby, Cody's wife." "Cody always speaks highly of you. Thank you for coming today." I extended my hand, but she didn't shake it, and instead walked further into the house, saying, "Excuse my intrusion." Her attitude struck me as odd, but maybe that's just how young people are today. Were you cooking?" Cody asked, entering behind her and looking at the dining area. "Yes, I thought it was about lunchtime," I answered, puzzled by his question. "Oh, Cody and I already had pasta. Sorry," she said in a flirting tone. "Cody? Would you normally call your boss by their first name?" Despite a lingering sense of unease, I remembered what Cody had mentioned before. "In our department, everyone is on friendly terms and we call each other by first names." It seems he said that. "Okay, I should have checked. My bad," I said, recalling his words and smiling. "Come on, Walter, introduce yourself." At my prompt, Walter stood up and greeted her. "Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Walter." "I'm Mary. You look just like Cody. Handsome." No, I mean..." Walter seemed embarrassed, but not entirely displeased. Later, she and Walter chatted in the living room. "She's a nice girl, isn't she?" Cody smiled. It seemed like he wasn't bothered by the odd feelings I had, being with her for just a few hours today. "Yes, she is." What else could I have said in that situation? Later, Cody joined the conversation, and the 3 of them talked happily. Walter, who was initially reluctant, seemed to warm up to her friendliness. I convinced myself, if Walter is happy, then it's okay. That day, the 3 of them seemed to get along well, and ended up having dinner together. I was the only one preparing sushi, cooking, and shopping, but she didn't pay any attention. She didn't have to help, but the way she kept touching Walter and Cody, laughing loudly, made me uncomfortable. Though I intended to welcome her, I didn't like the idea of this new woman taking Walter away. With these thoughts, I continued preparing everything alone. I recalled how, when Amelia first visited our house, still a minor, she brought a cake and asked if she could help wash the dishes. I shouldn't compare, but the memory made me sigh. I wish for someone with that kind of consideration, I thought, watching the 3 of them laugh together from my isolated spot in the kitchen. But contrary to my thoughts, things progressed quickly. According to Walter, I don't like her in that way, but she's a nice girl, and maybe I'll come to like her. I was taken aback by such casual thoughts about marriage. but I was the one who encouraged it. I had no right to say anything. Cody really liked her, and Walter seemed to think the same. Eventually, they got engaged within 6 months of their first meeting. Walter and his wife offered to live with us. What a nice daughter-in-law to suggest living together in these times. Mary was well regarded by the neighbors. With a forced smile, I started our life together as a family of 4. Mary continued working, leaving and returning with Cody. They often came back late, so she didn't have time for housework. Apart from my part-time job, I was exhausted from the added chores. No, it was not physical tiredness, probably mental. Ruby, Mary would have preferred meat today. They would criticize the menu, or, we have a meeting today, so Cody and I will eat out, including Cody in their plans. It's good that they're close. However, I'm sure she's having Cody treat her to fancy meals. Mary, we need to save for the wedding, I would say, only for Cody to reprimand me. Mary is still new to our home and is trying to adjust. It's okay to dine out with her occasionally. Besides, I'm the one paying, so she's not spending any money. Cody reprimanded me. Despite my displeasure with this, Cody didn't seem to notice. We haven't dined out in a while. Why do you always have to go with Mary? Walter can take her, I argued, but Cody just laughed it off. His defense of her and Mary's occasional behavior bothered me, but I couldn't help feeling negative. I knew I was being petty, but I hoped Mary would realize it eventually. They had kindly offered to live with us. I really want to get along well with them. These feelings are genuine. Months later, the wedding day arrived. Cody and I prepared early. It was a homely party at Walter's request, and we greeted guests with the newlyweds. Many guests were common acquaintances since Cody and Mary worked together. Mary stood next to Cody, and Walter and I greeted the relatives. I'm truly grateful to the chief director for introducing me to such a wonderful person, Mary said humbly, referring to Cody by his title, though she usually used his first name. I wondered if she had a dual personality, but it was a joyous occasion. I stopped overthinking. Matilda, long time no see. Mary's mother, Matilda, greeted us. Mary's family lived far away. She was born to an older mother and raised by her single mother, a hard-working woman. She seemed strict, but was delighted with Walter and Mary's marriage, even giving me gifts. Raised by Matilda, I couldn't give up hope that Mary would change. It was hard for the elderly woman to welcome guests. She had been contacted to arrive on time with her brother, and it seemed they had just arrived. It's us who should apologize for not being able to help, Matilda said, bowing her head. Not at all, I replied. Is Mary causing any trouble? She asked. I paused for a moment, but then smiled. She's working hard, and recently she and Cody even looked after our grandson, Scott. She's really become part of the family. Matilda seemed relieved by my words. Taylor and his wife also came. Our grandson Scott is now 4 years old. He seemed excited by the unusual atmosphere today, apparently having been overly energetic at home. By the time he arrived, he was sound asleep. Oh dear. I chuckled at his sleeping face. I was convinced that today would be a happy day with everyone here. The wedding began. The MC guided the event, but it was lively and informal. Mary and Cody were mingling with their colleagues, introducing Walter. Holding the still sleeping Scott, I told Taylor and his wife, "Eat while Scott is asleep." I was fussing over Taylor and his wife, telling them to eat while Scott was asleep. But holding Scott, I noticed Amelia being considerate. After encouraging them to eat at their leisure, I headed towards where Cody and the others were, still carrying Scott. I'm a good daughter-in-law, right? I could hear Mary saying this to a colleague, as if wearing a mask, even from a distance. Then she leaned in to look at Cody's face, seeking confirmation. She really is a wonderful daughter-in-law. I'm so happy that Walter has found such a great daughter-in-law. I felt a twinge of irritation at Cody's words, but inserted myself into the conversation. Hello, thank you for being here today. I'm Cody's wife, Ruby. When I greeted the colleagues, Cody introduced me to them as well. I received congratulations from the colleagues and thanked them with a smile. However, Mary, who heard Cody introducing me, seemed to sour her expression for some reason. Was she annoyed at not being the center of attention? I get along so well with my in-laws. Everyone in the neighborhood says I'm a good daughter-in-law. Right, Ruby? Mary said, turning to me. In the midst of this, she wrapped her arm around Cody's. Wait a minute. Even Cody seemed perplexed by this. Then she took Walter's arm with her other hand, as if claiming both men from me. Her triumphant look seemed to mock me. Then I heard a sweet voice. Grandma? Awake already? I asked. Yeah. It seems Scott finally woke up. Rubbing his eyes, still sleepy, he looked around. Trying to hide my agitation, I said, Cody, Scott's awake. And just then, Ah, the wrestling sister! Scott said, pointing at Mary with a happy smile. Wrestling? Mary? The colleagues around us started laughing. Hey, don't say such things. I scolded Scott. I didn't know what he was thinking, but Mary's face seemed to stiffen. Did she play wrestling with you the other day? I said, laughing it off. Scott shook his head. Because she was on top of Grandpa before. His words echoed among the colleagues. What? I muttered in surprise. Seeing Cody and Mary turn pale, I was at a loss for words. What? Mary was on top of Dad? Walter spoke up in my stead. His questions stirred the venue into commotion. The laughter and smiles of the colleagues disappeared. Walter's voice must have been loud. It attracted everyone's attention. What do you mean by that? Walter shouted. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Mary, still pale, forced a smile and said to Walter, When I asked him what he was doing, he said they were playing wrestling. Scott said, puzzled. On the bed? Walter asked Scott. Yeah. Walter spoke again, hesitantly asking, Were you wearing clothes? Scott shook his head in response, meaning they were not clothed. I felt drained. I almost collapsed. Holding Scott tightly to prevent dropping him, my legs wobbled. A colleague offered me a chair in response. No, it's just a 4-year-old speaking. Don't take it seriously. Cody laughed, but I could see sweat on his face. What do you mean? Did you get involved with a subordinate? And even your son's wife? The boss, who had arrived first and had been greeted by Cody and Mary, questioned. No, I didn't. Cody protested, but the boss looked stern. I'm not at fault. He forced himself on me. Mary pretended to cry, unconvincingly. I couldn't forgive Cody or Mary's behavior. I accused, Did you marry Walter just to live with Cody? Cody and Mary both looked at me. Hey, don't say such things! Don't believe it! Cody said hastily, trying to excuse himself. I've been suspecting something strange. If you planned this from the beginning, then your behavior towards me makes sense. I said, outraged. However, Mary, acting like an actress, shed tears and shook her head. Ruby, that's terrible! Who's really terrible here? Both of you! Get out of the house! Walter defended me. You're not wanted at the company either. We don't need people who disrupt the order. The boss added. The two finally seemed to grasp the seriousness of the situation. Mary, still pale, wailed, while Cody tried to ingratiate himself with me and the boss. The wedding ended in the worst atmosphere. I kept bowing to the departing guests, but everyone was kind, saying, It's not Ruby's fault. Don't push yourself. Their words were a small comfort amid the misfortune. The wedding was over, but the battle for me and Walter was just beginning. Taylor had a detailed conversation with Scott, and together, with Walter's words, the story became clear. Recently, when Taylor and his wife were out, we were looking after Scott. I was at my part-time job, and Cody and Walter's wife were supposed to watch him. It was not unusual for us to take care of Scott like this, so taking care of Scott in itself wasn't unusual. But on that day, while Scott was napping, Mary apparently expressed a desire to eat steak from a steakhouse in the neighboring town. "Then shall we all go when Mom returns?" Walter suggested. But Cody said, "Ruby will be tired, so let's buy it and eat at home. Let's prepare for Taylor and his family too." Thinking Scott was asleep, Walter left alone. When Scott woke up from his nap, he peeked into the bedroom upon hearing Cody's voice. What followed was as everyone guessed. Scott witnessed them, and they made up a ridiculous excuse of playing wrestling, even telling him not to tell anyone. At the wedding, Scott, still half asleep, had forgotten about the promise. Walter, Taylor, and I confronted Cody and Mary with this information. "It was against my will," Mary kept saying. "So should we go to the police?" Walter's suggestion silenced Mary, her face turning pale. "Ruby, haven't we always overcome everything together?" Cody pleaded with me. It seemed he didn't want a divorce. "Yes, that's why I never expected to be betrayed like this," I retorted. "I just gave in to impulse." Cody kept his head down, but Mary seemed displeased with his words. "Wait, what? Gave in to impulse? Weren't you the one who said to marry Walter because you wanted to live together but couldn't divorce?" Mary burst out angrily. Her words were inconsistent, sometimes denying, sometimes affirming. They seemed to have reached their limit with lies. The more they talked, the less their stories aligned. My sons and I sighed heavily at them. Seeing us, Cody and Mary bowed their heads again. It was truly pathetic. Was this the Cody I knew? I felt like crying. "Anyway, pack your things and leave," I said. "Ruby! Ruby!" Both of their voices overlapped. "Don't call me by my name!" Even hearing my name from them was nauseating. "For the divorce settlement, Mary owes me $20K, Cody owes me $10K, and Cody owes Walter $20K. Mary owes Walter $10K. A total of $60,000. I will make sure to claim it." They turned pale. Their hands trembled as if frozen. "That's not enough for what Scott saw. Demand compensation for him too, Taylor." Walter spoke to Taylor. "Yeah, the hurt Scott has can't really be compensated with money. Don't forget that." Taylor added. Cody bit his lip deeply. There might still be some awareness in him of being a grandpa, but even that awareness, just for today. "Also, the mortgage of this house is mine. The ownership is mine. I have no obligation to let you stay, so this isn't a joke." They must have realized our seriousness. Despite my irritation at their silence, we must have inflicted at least half the damage we suffered. Walter and I looked at each other and laughed at the ridiculousness of the two. Eventually, the incident spread throughout the company, and they were forced to resign. Their severance pay, being joint property, was properly divided in the divorce. They had to borrow from relatives to pay the settlement. Everyone at the wedding was disgusted with Cody. I wondered if anyone would lend him money. Mary received an apology and payment from Matilda. Matilda, though deeply distressed and elderly, came to apologize, and I couldn't say anything against her kindness. Though she paid, it seemed she was cutting ties with Mary. There was a request to return to her parents' home because she lost her job. But she was told, "I don't know a child like you," and was dismissed. She is an adult now. She should take responsibility for herself and live her life properly. And as expected, the relationship between Cody and Mary didn't work out. They broke up. I heard rumors they were bad-mouthing each other, but I truly didn't care. Then, the life of just Walter and me began. It's a stress-free, happy, everyday life. Wonder if I should get married, Walter mused. Do whatever you like, I said, laughing it off. Walter was hurt by marriage. I couldn't push him towards another one. However, years later, Walter said he had something to tell me. I found someone I want to marry. I can't express how happy I was to hear that. The girl he introduced was a junior colleague at his company. What happens next is uncertain, but Walter and I still have so much ahead. Life is long. I believe there's always a path to happiness.